You know that feeling? It's Sunday night, maybe 7 or 8 o'clock, and the weekend has officially just slipped through your
Oh,
fingers.
yeah, the Sunday scaries.
Exactly. The house is quiet, and suddenly, there it is.
Hmm.
Just this heavy, creeping dread settling right in the pit of your stomach.
It's awful.
You're already exhausted, and Monday morning hasn't even started yet. You're just, dreading the sheer energy it's going to take to go through the motions tomorrow at a job that feels toxic or pointless or just completely draining.
And it's a very specific kind of exhaustion, isn't it? I mean, it isn't just physical tiredness from a long day. It's this deep soul-level fatigue where
Yes.
your actual motivation feels completely hollowed out.
Yeah, the best way I can describe the modern worker right now is it's like a smartphone running on 1% battery.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. But the problem isn't just the main screen draining the power. You've got all these invisible background apps running simultaneously,
Navigating office politics.
walking on eggshells around a micromanaging boss.
Carrying that constant nagging feeling that your daily tasks don't actually matter at all.
Exactly. You are constantly operating on low power mode. But what if I told you that this exhaustion isn't because work itself is a punishment, but because you are plugged into the entirely wrong energy source?
And that is exactly the core of what we're unpacking today.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the underlying theology of work, it completely upends the modern narrative of the 8 to 5 grind.
It really does. So, for this deep dive, our mission is to map out a totally different blueprint for how to handle a wearying job. We want to help you shift your perspective back to your true purpose.
And we're doing that by pulling from some incredible sources today. We've got deep theological insights by writers like Timothy Keller and John Piper.
And we're pairing that with very practical daily survival tools like specific prayers and devotionals from Joyce Meyer, Answers in Genesis, and KLOVE.
We basically want to find the right charger for that 1% battery.
Right. But before we get to the actual fix, I have to ask the foundational question.
Okay, lay it on me.
If God designed the world, and work is a major part of the human experience, why does my alarm clock feel like my mortal enemy every morning? Like, are we just paying the penalty for being human? Was work always meant to be a punishment?
See, that assumption that work is the penalty for being human, that is the default setting for so many of us.
It feels like it.
But if you dig into Timothy Keller's book, Every Good Endeavor, or the theological breakdowns provided by Answers in Genesis, you discover something incredibly counterintuitive.
Which is?
Work was absolutely not a result of the fall of humanity. It wasn't introduced as a punishment at all.
Wait, really?
Yeah. If you look at the very first chapters of Genesis, the narrative starts with God working. He is creating, organizing, building.
Okay, yeah.
And then he places humanity in the Garden of Eden and right away gives them a job to do.
See, I always pictured the Garden of Eden as this like ultimate eternal vacation, just lounging under a tree, eating grapes.
Right, like an all-inclusive resort.
Exactly. But you're saying paradise actually came with a job description?
It did. Humanity was directed to tend and keep the garden. The profound insight here is that work is actually a reflection of divine creativity.
Oh, wow.
Because humans are made in the image of a creator, we are intrinsically designed to create, to cultivate, to bring order out of chaos.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Pastor Tu Tessin brings up a brilliant point on this. He argues that we don't just work to earn the means to live, we live to work. He points to Keller's idea that work is as much a basic human need as food, beauty, rest, or friendship.
So without meaningful work, the human soul actually starves.
Exactly.
Okay, but I'm trying to reconcile that idea with the reality of, say, a Tuesday afternoon.
Sure.
If work is literal food for the soul and the original design was rooted in paradise, what broke? Because sitting in a 2-hour Zoom meeting about synergy does not feel like cultivating a beautiful garden.
No, it definitely doesn't.
Did the nature of the tasks themselves change?
Well, the tasks didn't necessarily become evil, but the environment where those tasks happen was fundamentally fractured.
Okay, how so?
The sources point to the biblical narrative of the fall. When humanity rebelled, it didn't introduce the concept of labor, it introduced thorns and thistles.
Ah, okay.
The Answers in Genesis article paints a really vivid picture here. Before the fall, the earth cooperated perfectly with human effort. You plant a seed, it grows.
Simple.
But after the fall, the ground is cursed. Now there is toil, there's sweat. Weeds are actively competing with the crops.
So I imagine the modern equivalent of thorns and thistles isn't just, literal weeds in a garden.
No, not usually.
It's more like software bugs that delete your progress. It's supply chain failures. It's coworkers who actively sabotage your project to make themselves look better.
That is the exact modern translation.
Yeah.
The sheer friction of getting anything done, that is the curse. That's the thorns.
Wow.
The act of working itself remains a holy calling, but the arena you are doing it in is deeply, deeply broken.
So for anyone listening who feels completely drained, your weariness is actually entirely validated.
100%. It is
Yeah.
a completely natural response to operating in a fractured system.
Honestly, just validating the exhaustion is a huge relief. It means I'm not crazy for feeling burnt out.
Right.
But understanding the theology of the fall doesn't really change the fact that tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., I still have to face a boss who sends passive-aggressive emails.
True.
So how do we actually operate in a field full of thorns without getting torn up?
This is where we have to move from the macro theology of work down into the micro daily survival tactics. You have to literally rewire how you engage with your environment.
And our sources provide some very specific practical tools for doing exactly that.
They do.
This makes me think of the approach outlined in the KLOVE resource we pulled. It's called 8 Prayers for a Toxic Work Environment, and it uses specific verses to fundamentally alter your workplace dynamic.
Oh, I loved this part.
Yeah, I like to think of it like changing the client on a massive project.
Okay, explain that.
Imagine you're a graphic designer and your current client is just impossible. They're demanding, ungrateful, and they constantly change the requirements at the last minute.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It is. Every time you open your laptop, you just want to quit. But imagine if overnight the client changes to someone you deeply admire, respect, and genuinely want to impress.
Okay.
You're using the exact same software, you're drawing the exact same designs, but your energy completely transforms simply because of who you are handing the final product to.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. When you change the client to God, the brief changes too.
Exactly.
And that is the entire mechanical function of Colossians chapter 3, verse 23. The verse says, "Work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people."
Man, that's powerful.
It really is. The old client, your toxic boss, wanted ruthless efficiency, or maybe they just wanted their own ego stroked. But the new client, God wants integrity, honesty, and grace.
Which completely shifts the focus.
KLOVE encourages using this verse as a daily act of prayer. When you pray, "Lord, help me to remember I'm not working for my boss today, I'm working for you," you are taking the final evaluation of your performance out of the hands of a flawed manager.
I imagine that completely disarms the fear of failure, too. Because if my boss is impossible to please, I am going to burn out trying to chase their approval.
For sure.
But if I'm working for a God who sees my unseen effort and my underlying integrity, that sets a standard I can actually meet.
Right, because he sees the heart behind the work.
But let's look at the emotional weight of a toxic job for a second. Because some workplaces aren't just annoying. The expectations and the negativity are genuinely crushing.
Yeah, and the KLOVE devotional addresses that heavy burden directly, using the words of Jesus in Matthew chapter 11.
Remind me what that one says.
He says, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest."
Ah, yes.
In a context of a toxic job, this is about recognizing and removing a very specific yoke.
Like the harness for animals.
Exactly. A yoke is that heavy wooden harness used to lock oxen together for plowing. In a toxic environment, your coworkers or your managers have likely strapped a heavy yoke of anxiety, unrealistic expectations, or a constant crisis right onto your shoulders.
Oh, I have absolutely felt that. It's like when a coworker CCs the entire department on a minor mistake you made just to shift the blame.
Yep.
They're basically trying to strap their own insecurity onto your back.
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
And prayer becomes the mechanism for unhooking that harness. It is an active decision to say, I refuse to carry the toxicity you are trying to assign to me.
I love that.
And when you hand that burden over, you suddenly have the inner bandwidth required to actually deal with difficult people.
Because you're not carrying all that defensive weight anymore.
Exactly. Romans 12 tells us to do all we can to live in peace with everyone. And Proverbs 15 reminds us that a gentle answer deflects anger.
Which is so hard to do in the moment.
Oh, it's nearly impossible if you're weighed down by the anxiety of the workplace. Your immediate reaction is going to be snapping back. You'll just fight fire with fire.
Right.
But if you've handed that yoke over, you have an inner buffer. You can respond with a gentle answer, maintaining your own integrity, even when your colleagues are completely abandoning theirs.
Okay, I have to pause and challenge this for a second, though.
Go for it.
Surviving a terrible job by finding peace and changing your perspective, that's a great coping mechanism. But according to the sources we're looking at, God's ultimate plan isn't just mere survival,
Right.
it's joy. And I have to be honest, when I am doing mindless data entry for 8 straight hours or getting screamed at by angry clients on a support call, how am I supposed to be joyful?
It sounds like a stretch, doesn't it?
It really does. Isn't that just fake, toxic positivity? I mean, we've all seen that one coworker who smiles vacuously while the whole department is burning down, and it just feels deeply inauthentic.
That is a crucial distinction, and it's a trap a lot of well-meaning people fall into. But if you look at the writings of David K. Carpenter and Joyce Meyer in our stack of sources, they draw a massive bright line separating happiness from joy.
Okay, so they're not the same thing.
They're absolutely not the same biological or spiritual mechanism. Happiness is entirely circumstantial.
Like you're happy because it's 5:00 p.m. on a Friday.
Right. Or you're happy because your boss brought donuts.
Yeah.
But the moment the circumstances turn negative, the happiness just evaporates.
Yeah, happiness is literally dependent on whatever happens to be happening to you in the moment.
But joy, as Carpenter explains it, is a deep, steady confidence. It's an assurance that God is with you, that he loves you, and that the ultimate victory of your life is already secured.
Wow.
Carpenter points to Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 10. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Think about the mechanics of that statement. Joy isn't the reward you get at the end of a smooth, successful day.
It's the fuel.
Yes. Joy is the actual fuel you burn to get through a disastrous one.
That reframes it completely. Joy isn't a sunny disposition. It's actually an act of resistance.
Defiance against despair is exactly what it is. Carpenter brings up the Apostle Paul to illustrate this. Paul rejoiced while he was literally chained to a wall in a Roman prison cell.
Right.
When he wrote, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me," he wasn't claiming he could manifest any career promotion he wanted.
Right, he was in prison.
Exactly. He was stating that in any circumstance, even an unjust imprisonment, the profound joy of belonging to Christ gave him the resilience to endure it without breaking.
Which brings up the very practical question. How do you actually manufacture that kind of defiance?
You don't manufacture it on your own. Joyce Meyer talks about this in her devotional, and she calls it the God habit.
The God habit.
Yeah, because you can't just, snap your fingers and decide to be defiant and joyful while your manager is screaming at you.
No, definitely not.
True joy, the kind Jesus promised in John 10 when he talked about having life to the full, comes from intentionally waiting on God.
Waiting on God. What does Meyer say that looks like?
She points to Isaiah 40, which says God gives power to the faint and weary. And the mechanism for receiving that power is time spent in his presence.
Okay.
Meyer shares her own background of being a deeply negative, critical person. And she explains how establishing a habit of spending just 10 or 15 minutes a day with God began to actively rewire her wounded emotions.
But how does that actually work? Is it just sitting there in silence for 10 minutes?
It's about active recalibration. When you spend time focusing on the sheer magnitude of God, his power, his promises, his eternal nature, it literally shrinks the emotional size of your workplace crises.
Oh, I see.
A passive-aggressive email from your boss feels catastrophic when your job is the biggest thing in your universe.
Right. It takes up your whole vision.
Exactly. But when you purposefully spend time in the presence of God, your job gets demoted back to its proper, smaller place. That is how the bitterness gets uprooted.
So you aren't pasting a fake toxic smile over your misery. You're shrinking the misery down to a manageable size by comparing it to God.
That's beautifully put, yes.
Well, if you're walking into the office with that kind of inner defiance, a joy that refuses to be crushed by the environment, that has to change the actual atmosphere around you.
Oh, absolutely.
It isn't just internal survival anymore. And I think this is where John Piper's book, Don't Waste Your Life, completely shifts the paradigm of the 8 to 5.
Yes, let's talk about Piper.
Because if you're operating with that deep joy, your secular workplace ceases to be just a place where you trade your time to pay your mortgage. It becomes an active mission field.
Piper spends a significant portion of his book dismantling a very pervasive, almost accidental myth in modern Christianity.
What's the myth?
It's this idea that only pastors, missionaries, or people working for charities are doing holy or meaningful work, and that everyone else is just doing secular work in order to fund the real ministry.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that.
He completely rejects that divide. He argues that the secular vocation is actually the primary spiritual war zone.
Calling a corporate accounting firm or a construction site a spiritual war zone sounds pretty intense.
It does.
But we aren't talking about fighting with the guy in the next cubicle.
Not at all. The adversaries in this war zone aren't your coworkers.
Yeah.
The adversaries are apathy, greed, dishonesty, and despair.
Okay.
Piper is saying there is moral high ground to be gained for the glory of God, right there in your daily emails, your spreadsheets, or your plumbing repairs. You don't waste your life based on where you work. You waste it based on how and why you work.
I want to test this logic a bit. Piper says we shouldn't just labor for the food that perishes, which sounds a bit paradoxical because we do have to eat.
Right. We have mortgages and grocery bills.
Exactly. So how does a regular job, writing code for a logistics company, actually fight apathy or greed?
Look at what the Apostle Paul says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. He tells the early Christians to work with their hands so that they will not be dependent on anyone.
Okay, so providing for yourself so you aren't a burden to society is a noble foundational goal.
Yes, but Piper argues that we work for reasons far beyond just our own personal comfort. We work to bless society, to be useful to our neighbors, and to earn excess income specifically so we can be generous to people who are suffering.
Oh, wow.
So if you are writing logistics code and you do it with excellence, you are ensuring that supply chains work, that people get the goods they need, and that order replaces chaos.
And he uses this beautiful phrase where he says our daily work should be an adornment of the gospel, which means to make it beautiful or attractive.
Right. Think about the practical mechanics of that. If Christians in the workplace operate exactly like the rest of the world, if they're constantly complaining, cutting corners, doing the bare minimum, or ruthlessly obsessing over promotions, the gospel loses all its appeal.
Yeah, why would any of your coworkers want what you have spiritually if you are just as miserable, stressed, and deceitful as they are?
Exactly. But when you do your work with integrity, deep competence, and a genuinely joyful spirit, it points directly to a God of order and beauty. It makes the truth you claim to believe look incredibly attractive to a deeply exhausted world.
That perfectly answers why the Answers in Genesis article put such a heavy emphasis on doing our work heartily. Our daily labor is literally a walking billboard for what we believe about the nature of God.
It's a heavy responsibility, but it's also profoundly dignifying. It means your specific, mundane job right now matters immensely to the fabric of reality.
But we need a reality check here.
Right.
Even if I have a renewed purpose, even if I have deep joy and a sense of mission, human beings have physical, mental, and emotional limits.
We do.
Treating the workplace as a spiritual war zone sounds exhausting. How does a listener avoid just burning out while trying to be an adornment of the gospel?
Well, if your theology of work is robust and demanding, your theology of rest has to be equally powerful. Without a biblical understanding of true rest, we default to mere escapism, which never actually restores us.
You know, the difference between rest and escapism makes me think of the difference between running on a treadmill versus running on a beautiful scenic trail.
Well, break that down for me.
So if you run 5 miles on a treadmill, you're sweating, your heart rate is up, you're putting in maximum effort, but you never actually see yourself move forward. You're just staring at a blank wall.
Right.
And that causes a very specific kind of mental fatigue, a feeling of absolute pointlessness.
Because you aren't going anywhere.
Exactly. But if you run 5 miles on a mountain trail, you're physically tired, but your soul feels refreshed because you've seen progress, you've navigated obstacles, you've taken in beauty.
That's a great point.
I feel like modern work is just a treadmill for most people, and their version of rest is just stepping off the treadmill to stare at a different screen.
That analogy perfectly captures the existential exhaustion we feel. When you're on the treadmill, you're moving, but you aren't arriving anywhere.
Right.
Pastor 2 Tess again addresses this directly by looking back at Genesis chapter 2. He examined God's own pattern of creation and identifies 3 distinct phases: stopping, looking, and going. Stopping, looking, and going. Okay? God worked for 6 days, and then he stopped. But he didn't just walk away and power down. He stopped, and then he looked at what he had made, and he declared that it was very good.
See, we are exceptionally good at the stopping part. The clock hits 5:00 p.m., we stop working, we go home, we turn on the TV, we do our leisure activities.
Yeah.
But we completely skip the looking part.
And skipping that step is exactly why we never feel rested. Pastor Eshin says that a massive portion of our workplace fatigue isn't physical exertion. It's the feeling that we are laboring in vain.
Wow.
When we fail to look back at our work and actively acknowledge the good we've accomplished, the client we helped, the problem we solved, the small bit of order we created out of chaos, we rob ourselves of the meaning of our labor. True rest involves intentional reflection, not just zoning out.
But what if you look back at your week and it was just a total failure? Like, what if the project tanked or the boss was unhappy no matter what you did? Where's the rest then?
That is where Pastor Etchen takes it to the deepest level. Ultimately, your profound soul-level rest cannot come from finishing your to-do list or achieving inbox zero.
Because there's always more to do.
Exactly. Even if you do achieve it, there will be another crisis tomorrow. He says we can only find deep rest in the finished work of Christ.
I want to make sure I'm connecting those dots correctly. If the ultimate work of salvation is already finished, does that mean my daily spreadsheets and emails don't actually matter?
Not at all. It means they matter for serving your neighbor, but they do not matter for proving your worth.
Oh, that's a huge distinction.
As long as you rely on your productivity to find your ultimate value, whether you were trying to prove yourself to your manager, to society, or even to God, you will be stuck on that treadmill forever. You will constantly be striving.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting.
But if you internalize the fact that your full acceptance and value are already permanently secured by Jesus, the pressure comes off. You still do your job with excellence to glorify God, but you are no longer working to earn your right to exist.
Right.
Jesus said on the cross, "It is finished." When you rest in that finality, the crushing weight of the 8 to 5 simply evaporates.
That is the ultimate circuit breaker for burnout. The work matters deeply, but it does not define your soul's value.
Exactly.
Let's bring all of this together for you, the listener. If you're feeling that Sunday night dread creeping in, or if you're logging on tomorrow morning already feeling utterly defeated by a toxic environment, hold on to this blueprint.
Yes.
Your work is not a punishment. The environment is fractured and full of thorns, which is why it is so difficult, but the daily act of working is a divine calling. You have the power, through intentional prayer, to change your client, to shift your boss from the person sitting down the hall to God himself.
And remember that you do not have to rely on fleeting circumstances for happiness. You can cultivate a deep, defiant joy by intentionally spending time in God's presence, letting His scale and magnitude shrink your workplace crises.
It's all about perspective.
Your secular job is a holy mission field. Your competence, your gentleness, and your integrity make the gospel incredibly beautiful to an exhausted world watching you.
And when you're tired, remember to step off the treadmill. Stop and actually look at the good you have done, and ultimately find your deepest rest in the fact that your worth is already permanently secured.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder based on John Piper's idea that God is most glorified in us when we are most satisfied in Him.
Okay, what is it?
Tomorrow morning, when you open your laptop or walk through the front doors of your workplace, ask yourself this question. If Jesus had my exact job today, how would He do it? And how would His deep, unshakable joy completely confuse and ultimately inspire my coworkers?
Man, think about what that kind of joyful defiance would actually look like in your next staff meeting. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you take this blueprint, plug into the right power source, and carry that renewed purpose into the rest of your week.